Alright, let's start with a quick experiment. For that we'll need an object. This mug will do. And a second element will be a subject that can experience this mug. In our case, let's use a human. This one will be fine. Wait, I can summon things? Henry Cavill Nick. So here we are. I'm looking at this mug. This person is looking at this mug, which is just one of the senses that this mug can be experienced with. And there is a lot of going on in just that simple act of seeing. I could be viewing the mug from different angles, each giving me a bit of new information. For example, from one side I can see the color and shape, but not the handle's position. From another angle, maybe I would notice some imperfections, or I won't see writing on the side. And of course, my experience is affected by external factors too, like the lighting, where the mug is placed, and what else is in the room. And on top of all this, there are factors about me, the subject, that influence how I see the mug, my memories of using it, the way my eyes work, and even my intentions. I could see it as my favorite coffee mug, which it is actually, or I could just see it as a tool for measuring milk or flour. This little exercise sets us up to ask about three things: the subject, so the person, the object, the mug, and perception, so what's happening between them. And there is a whole branch of philosophy dedicated to studying these kinds of experiences, which we call phenomena. The branch is Phenomenology. The word phenomenology comes from the Greek phenomenon, meaning that which appears, and logos, meaning study or account. So, phenomenology is the study of appearances or experiences, how things present themselves to us. In phenomenology, we are not concerned with just what a mug is as an objective thing. That's the job of science or ontology. Instead, phenomenology asks how we perceive and experience this mug. It's all about exploring the way things appear to our consciousness, what phenomenologists call the modes of giveness. And it seems odd and unnecessary, as many things in philosophy actually, but the ideas built upon phenomenology are simply mind-blowing. Phenomenology has a bit of a reputation for being tough to grasp, but in this video we are going to break down some of its key ideas and hopefully make them a bit more relatable, as they are already fascinating. Phenomenology is deeply tied to three philosophers: Edmund Husserl, who is considered the founding father of this branch, Martin Heidegger, which was Husserl's student, and Maurice Merleau-Ponty. Each brought their own insights into how we experience the world, and each influenced the development of phenomenology in different ways, exploring perception in phenomenology. So what's phenomenology really asking? In short, how do we experience objects? The difference between asking what a mug is and how a mug appears to us is huge. The what focuses on the mug as an objective object. It's looking for facts about the mug itself. But phenomenology is about the how. So how does mug reveal itself to me through my perception? This isn't about objective reality, but rather about the subjective ways we encounter and understand objects in our world. And this brings us to a crucial technical concept in phenomenology, which is very often misunderstood, and it's intentionality. Intentionality is the idea that our mental states are always about something. In other words, consciousness isn't just floating around in a void. It's always directed towards some object, whether that's a mug, a memory, or an idea. This focus on directedness or aboutness is central to phenomenology. Husserl famously said, "The objects of which we are conscious are not simply in consciousness as in a box, so that they can merely be found in it and snatched at in it. They are first constituted as being what they are for us, and as what they count as for us, in varying forms of objective intention." Of course, it sounds very vague, but let's try to understand it. Constituted meaning that, through our conscious acts, we actively shape and give meaning to these objects, in ways that make them what they are for us. In other words, objects take on significance and identity only as they come into our awareness. The directed focus we bring to them. This means that every object's being is partly defined by the way we experience and intend it, which leaves us with a profound conclusion that there is no object for us without our unique mode of relating to it. Intentionality also means that every time I look at this mug, I'm not simply seeing a mug in a neutral sense. My perception of it is influenced by my intentions, my memories, and even the context. So I'm constituting its meaning. For example, if I'm looking for a tool to measure milk or flour, I will look at this mug as a tool for that purpose. and not as my favorite coffee mug. To break it down, there are three ways I might perceive an object. I could represent the mug in language, like by describing it in words, so using a linguistic representer. In this case, saying a mug, or using a different language. I could see it as a visual image if I look at a photograph of it. Then I have to also agree that the photograph functions as a sign, because a photography can also be an object of my experience, a different object of my experience. And I could have a direct perception of it, like I'm now, sitting with the mug in front of me. Each perception is valid and uniquely shaped by context and intention. This is what phenomenology calls the giveness of an object, the way in which something is presented to our awareness. Mind and the world. Another core idea in phenomenology is the relationship between the mind and the world. Unlike some other philosophies, phenomenology rejects the idea that the mind is closed off from reality, or that objects have some unreachable ultimate essence. Instead, phenomenology claims that the mind and the world are intertwined. Our experiences and the objects we perceive are deeply connected. Now, Heidegger takes this relationship further with his concept of Dasein, or being there. Dasein is his technical term for the human condition of being inherently embedded in the world. He writes, "In directing itself towards and in grasping something, Dasein doesn't first go outside of the inner sphere in which it is initially encapsulated, but rather, in its primary kind of being, it is always already outside, together with some being encounter in the world already discovered. Nor is any inner sphere abundant when Dasein dwells together with a being to be known and determines its character. Rather, even in this being outside, together with its object, Dasein is inside. Correctly understood, it itself exists as the being in the world which knows. In other words, and in more common language, we are never simply inside our minds, and we don't have to step outside ourselves to experience things in the world. Our very nature is to be with things in the world. So there's no division between the inner experience of the mind and the outer reality of objects. Instead, we are being in the world, an integrated, dynamic state. Perception and embodiment. Merleau-Ponty brings in the notion of embodiment, how our bodies play a fundamental role in perception. He famously says, "The world is entirely on the inside, and I'm entirely outside of myself." For Merleau-Ponty, the body is not merely a vessel for experiencing objects. It's a core part of how objects are presented to us. Our senses, orientation, and physicality all shape our experiences in a unique, situated way. For example, when I look at the mug, the angle, lighting, and even my eye level affect what I see. I don't just see the mug from a view from nowhere, but from my particular bodily perspective, which makes each moment of perception unique. The Epoché. Epoché refers to a process where we bracket or set aside all preconceived beliefs, assumptions, and judgments about an object. This doesn't mean that we doubt the existence of the object or dismiss our experience of it, but rather that we suspend all preformed ideas about what it is based on, everyday assumptions or scientific knowledge. This opens the way for a fresh and biased look at the direct experience itself. Let's take our mug as an example. Normally, we see the mug as an everyday object, a container for drinking coffee or tea, perhaps even as my favorite mug with personal associations. But through Epoché, we try to suspend these assumptions. We aren't focusing on the mug's utility, its history, or its material makeup as a scientific fact. Instead, we let go of these layers of meaning to see the mug as it appears to us in the moment. When I look at the mug after this bracketing, I start to notice aspects I might typically ignore. The exact curve of its handle, the way the light catches its surface, and the feeling of its weight in my hand. By setting aside judgments, I open myself up to direct, immediate experience of the mug as a phenomenon, without layering on assumptions. This shift doesn't deny that the mug serves a purpose or has specific material qualities. Rather, it allows us to explore how the mug presents itself to our consciousness. The aim of Epoché is to focus purely on the experience, freeing us from habitual judgments and opening us to perceive the mug as it appears within our lived experience. Realism and idealism. So we arrive at the conclusion that the subjective objects are constituted by our consciousness and the way we perceive them. And one profound and mind-blowing consequence is that the world seems to exist more as our mental states than outside of us. Maybe there are only mental states, and in the objective reality, there's no mug. In other words, do objects exist independently or only through our perception? And this problem is known as an ontological debate between realism and idealism. Husserl is often identified as an idealist. He suggests that we can't claim objects exist entirely apart from us, because they are constituted through our consciousness. Phenomenology doesn't so much deny objective reality as it denies our direct, objective access to it, so the claim seems to be weaker. But one of the students of Edmund Husserl, Polish philosopher Roman Ingarden, took this debate even further. His work Controversy over the Existence of the World explored whether the world exists independently of our perception. And he was a realist. He claimed that the world exists independently of our perception. Of course, the main problem then is how it exists. So what are the possible modes of existence of objects, different objects in the world? What does it mean that something exists in the world? And how can we know that something exists? Phenomenology opens up questions about the nature of reality and whether we can ever truly grasp it, or if we are forever interacting only with our perceptions of it. So, to sum it up, phenomenology isn't about answering questions like what a mug is in an objective sense. Instead, it's about exploring how a mug or any object appears to us, how it's given to us in experience. It's a shift from studying objective facts to studying subjective perceptions, which can radically change how we understand the mind and world. Phenomenology asks us to pay attention to the ways we experience things, not just the things themselves. It tells us that our mind is open and reality is constantly manifesting itself to us, yet we can never grasp it entirely. And maybe that's okay. Phenomenology then isn't trying to pin down an ultimate truth about objects, but to reveal the fascinating, complex ways we relate to and experience our world. The world is entirely on the inside, and I'm entirely outside myself. We are part of a world that's deeply interconnected with our perception of it. And phenomenology gives us a powerful framework to explore this interconnectedness. Okay, I hope my explanations weren't too confusing. If you're interested in phenomenology, I strongly suggest you reading Phenomenology: The Basics by Dan Zahavi. In my opinion, it's the best introductory book to this topic. As a next step, or if you would like to read a classic, is the book Idea of Phenomenology by Edmund Husserl, so the founding father of phenomenology. And that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can give me a like and you can consider giving me a subscription if you want to see more content like this in the future. If you have any questions about phenomenology or maybe you have a comment, the comment section is for you, so don't be shy. Thank you once again for being there and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.